Because again, it creates that hologram. That thought form has already created a hologram that you can shift into, a reference point you can shift into in that moment. The moment you entertain doubt and disbelief is the same moment you create it. Studying Neville, studying Vadim Zealand, studying all the contemporaries of reality creation, manifestation, law of attraction, law of assumption, law of magnetism, whatever you want to call it, whatever words are most synonymous with what you feel they represent to you, has made me believe that the way that you talk to yourself is the most imperative facet of adhering to this law. Everybody should marry themselves to. You are only ever talking to yourself. And I've known this for a while, and it's always good to get reminders, especially from this particular individual, Brianna, who shares her particular short story about just the principle of self-talk and how you need to carry your self-talk the same way you might carry a talisman around your neck, thumping, near your heart, in respects to its power and potency about what you perceive to be true in the 3D realm, and also what you perceive to happen to you as a consequence of serendipity or synchronicity. It all stems from that internal dialogue, and then also the thoughts that you allow to come out of that internal dialogue. So I'll waste no time here and go into Brianna's story. This is straight up what clicked it for me. I finally realized the power of inner conversations when I recognized the only I ever hear is my own. Might be a typo there. Sure, I can make my voice sound like my friend, hear their reaction to something I'm considering doing. Same with my mother, my father, my boss, and my grandmother. But if you ever think, I know exactly what X would say about this, you're speaking for them. We do this all the time. I hear my boss's voice when I'm developing a presentation and imagine the comments she'll say. I hear the voice of dating coaches when I'm overthinking responding to a particular romantic interest at a specific time. I can even imagine comments on a YouTube or TikTok video or Reddit thread before I even open the content. We do this every single moment of our lives, and it's these reactions that Neville is speaking to about when he says to work on that inner dialogue. There's been some events in my life that I typically have a natural internal reflex to, a natural internal conversation that typically is in its roots of pessimism. I always used to describe myself as a pessimist because I believe if you're a pessimist, then you can never be disappointed. However, I was, unbeknownst to me, manifesting situations that were pessimistic. If I was going to a party, if I was going to a social gathering, my instant reflex would be, it's probably not worth going. It's probably going to be bad. I'm probably going to run into awkward conversations. I'm probably going to feel socially anxious because there's strangers there. I don't like strangers. I don't like meeting new people. And already you've colored, you've tainted, you've poisoned the situation before you even entered it. This is what Neville was talking about when he refers to that internal almost habit, that habitual dialogue that you have that constantly is a self-protective mechanism, because that's where it comes from. That pessimism might not be stemmed in anything particularly irrational. I mean, it is when you think about it. But the logic behind it, the sound reasoning, is that it's a defense mechanism. If you understand that you're always expecting the worst circumstances, then you can prepare for those worst circumstances, and when they arise, you are not surprised. But if you understand the reality of quantum, if you understand the reality of assumption, then you know that you are already creating a reality unbeknownst to you because of that internal reflex. So we have to constantly, one of the practice that we constantly have to do is when we find ourselves spiraling down that road, when we find ourselves spiraling towards situations which are unconducive to where we want to go, if somebody's going to rip us off, or a situation isn't going to turn out in our favor, or we're not going to get the job that we want, or we're not going to get response from the person that we seek to bring into our lives, we're already coloring the matrix, the Maya, the 3D with a perception, with a reality, with holograms, because you create holograms through thought forms that we don't wish to want. So it's about catching ourselves in those moments, drawing them back in, and actually overlaying or erasing them, and then replacing them with dialogues and scenes and creativity and imaginations and all these internal monologues that are conducive with a reality that is more more pleasant to the imagination, more pleasant to the inner realm in here. So again, this is what Neville was referring to when he says, work on that inner dialogue. You'll become aware of what you're creating when you notice the first reaction you imagine about something. So when you start to get into a new habit of, when something is anticipating, when you're anticipating something, it's actually a positive anticipation instead of a pessimistic one. And this may take a long while, especially if you've got a long history of being, pessimistic. I think I meant optimistic previously. And you have this more optimistic overtones, and you actually perceive that things are going to work out in a favorable outcome for you. That's the one that needs to change. Yes, we always revise, of course, but it removes the need to even do so if we choose carefully the first time. Revisions are a very good practice if this is something that you struggle with particularly. So what you might do before the end of the day or the conclusion of the day is sit down with a journal and you go through these moments whereby you have this negative internal reflex to a situation, and you start to erase it and again overlay it with something. You revise it in a context which is more pleasing. So I mean, let's say social anxiety is something that I used to have a long time ago. If I was ever, I'm not saying that I don't get bouts of social anxiety now, but it's certainly vastly reduced comparatively to when I was maybe 21 or 22. And I used cannabis as a coping mechanism in these social situations. Probably wasn't the best coping mechanism because it made me paranoid. But I would enter into these social situations, parties at university, and think, goodness gracious me, I'm just going to roll up my joint in the corner, smoke it, and maybe I'll find my crowd with the other weed smokers or the other potheads. And I would find myself creating scenarios when I'm, let's say, conversating with the potheads and, in the corner of these parties and not actually engaging in, conversations with new people, maybe just being with my housemates and generally being a little bit of a recluse. If I had the presence of mind to understand Neville's law here and the power of internal dialogue and revision, I would perhaps take the time previously to going to that social occasion or even after that social occasion and actually rewriting how the script might change, in that maybe instead of reaching for the pre-roll, I would be introducing myself to the first person I saw and scripting a conversation I might have beforehand. Maybe I start talking about, oh, is this your house I'm in? Or how do you know the individuals that are there? Or what subject are you taking at university? And what are your interests? Who else do you know? And then before you know it, you're following that preordained visual and reality pathway, because again, it creates that hologram. That thought form has already created a hologram that you can shift into, a reference point you can shift into in that moment. And then once you physically go through the experience, you go, at the end of the day, come back to the journal and go, it's amazing how things changed for me when I had intention, when I actually used that internal dialogue to my favor to get an outcome that I would like instead of what my defense mechanism was writing for me. And I know this sounds very, very simple, guys, but if you actually ask yourself, do I actually take the time to script, revise, and visualize a scenario that is more favorable to me? I bet 99% of you, the answer is no. And the individuals who are getting what they want are the individuals who are taking action instead of those that are just mentally masturbating to this idea, which is something I don't want you to receive. If you're in this video, I don't want you to mentally masturbate. I don't want you to masturbate at all over these videos. I want you to be a creator, first and fundamentally. These aren't theories, these are facts. Speak soon.